Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for a very special live screening of Sophie Jones. This is a collaboration between Outside the Box Office, Women of Cinematic Arts, and Oscilloscope. We're going to be playing the entire feature, Sophie Jones, which runs 85 minutes here in the middle of the webinar. So it'll lead directly into the live Q&A that we'll have to follow with director, co-writer, producer Jessie Barr, moderated by SCA alumna Erika Davis-Marsh from the Women of Cinematic Arts board. Oscilloscope is going to release Sophie Jones in select theaters and on digital platforms and VOD as of tomorrow, March 2nd. So I will pass this over to Erika and hope that you enjoy the screening of Sophie Jones as we begin our very first day of Women's History Month. So Erika, thank you so much, and it's all yours.
Women of Cinematic Arts is super excited to be partnering with SCA, and Alex, thank you for inviting us to this wonderful film. And Women of Cinematic Arts is an organization that is full of women and gender non-conforming graduates of the School of Cinematic Arts. We aim to provide programming to our members that take them from graduation all the way up through retirement. However, we have many, many events that are not just for our members, they're open to the public. So I'm gonna just put in a few links here, and we hope you come follow us and find us. And we have plenty of events coming up, including some really fun master classes. And like I said, many of our events are open to the public. So we hope you join us and enjoy this film. We'll see you at the end.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm sorry, I have to give you the opportunity to rename yourself.
Yeah, I was like, who's? Thank you.
Hang on 1 second. Okay, there you go. You should be able to do it now. So thank you all so much for joining us for the Q&A with director, co-writer, and producer Jessie Barr. And I'm going to turn it over to SCA alumna Erika Davis-Marsh from the Women of Cinematic Arts. Please write any questions that you want to ask down in the Q&A box. And when Erika feels like the time is right, we'll read out some of these questions. So thank you so much, and take it away, Erika.
Thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate that. Jessie, welcome. What a lovely film. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Erika, so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and for sharing the film.
Yes, it's such a great way to start off, you know, a month of women, right? With this lovely film that you made with your cousin, which I think is amazing because I do a lot of things with my sister. She's one of my partners in film as well. So can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, how you two decided to work together on this story that has some personal meaning to both of you?
Yes, so it was sort of a strange confluence of events, a lot of synchronicity. My younger cousin, who stars as Sophie Jones in the film and co-wrote it with me, she and I both lost a parent when we were 16 years old to cancer. She lost her mother, I lost my father, and we share the same name. We're both named after our great grandmother. So there's a lot of synchronicity and sort of reflexivity and mirroring with that. We were not really close. She lived in Oregon. I lived on the East Coast. And then I, about 5 years ago, moved to Los Angeles. And I had never spoken really about losing my dad. I never really had explored that grief. I wasn't really able to really name it, or I kind of ran from the truth of my life, to be totally honest, for like most of my life. And then it was right before she sent me this early draft of a script where I started to open to sort of dancing with that grief and actually starting to like look at that experience. And it was exactly at that moment when my cousin Jessica sent me this very raw, honest, early draft of a script, and there were flashbacks and it was very vignette-y. But I think there was something about the timing of her sending that to me for whatever reason. I felt profoundly the need to be for her who I needed when I was younger, and to give voice to this shared experience. And it felt like a way to sort of recontextualize our experience, a way to give voice to our experiences and to process it, and also to make, something beautiful, to make art out of a lot of, shared pain and suffering. So it really wasn't, it's kind of wild, it's like kind of a miracle that this film exists. There was, I just immediately became a woman possessed, and we just dove in.
Awesome. So interesting. And did you find that so you both had a shared experience, but at different times, did you find any difference in your perspective as time went on, or as you're working on the script? Did you find you had two different perspectives on grief and on healing and what that looked like?
Yeah, there was a lot of shared experience, but also we both dealt with it in different ways as well. I think definitely for her, because her loss was more recent, there was this like immediacy, and me trying to be sort of, yes, like the protector, and the, wanted her to feel really safe and taken care of. And also I was sort of able to, I think, zoom out a little bit more, and a lot of that we put into it together. And there was also this idea that it is a story, and it is, although it's a scripted narrative, I used so much improvisation and casting, people in her life, and a lot of her, friends, trying to build off real relationships, so that we could really capture some honesty, and to help support, because a lot of them, it was their first time acting ever, my cousin included, a lot of the younger actors. So it was really about me capturing these moments and making them feel really taken care of and safe, and creating a language that we could work through together. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like, the grieving process is a never ending thing. And we talked a lot about that, how like there can be moments where you're like, brushing your teeth, and all of a sudden this like wave comes through your whole body, and it's very visceral. So yeah, I really wanted to give voice to that experience and honor that experience. And yeah.
You did. I have also lost a parent, so I can definitely relate to that. One of the scenes I thought was really interesting was where the flowers, sort of like the remnants of like, what do you do with all these like gifts that you're given to like heal when you definitely aren't healing, and they're little flowers in the bath. And I thought that was just a lovely touch. And I think you have a lot of really real moments. And you mentioned just now that you did work with her friends and her actors, and these are a lot of young people. Can you talk a little bit about the process and how you developed it with them, or how you worked with these young actors and people that maybe this might be their first film, or
Yeah. So I started as an actor. I come from a theater background. So I really implemented a lot of that collaborative nature in the film. And it's also, of course, you have to be that way. I feel like when you're working in independent film, like everyone's doing a million jobs, everyone has to just like dive in, and there has to be this quality of trust. So with the actors, yeah, it was like Jessica and I worked on the script. I really wanted to flesh out, because Sophie felt very clear, of course, because it's like a sort of a version of herself. But I wanted to clarify the relationships with her sister, who's played by Charlie Jackson, who's just extraordinary, Lucy. It was her first time acting on camera, and their camaraderie was just so beautiful. So yeah, working with her and getting her involved. And I found sorry, I like lost my train of thought. This is like so new, and with Zoom. But yes, incorporating a lot of these younger actors. So in of course, having like a script, having a blueprint, But also what I really wanted was for them to feel relaxed, to discover, and for it to be very exploratory and playful. So rather than, and of course, because I knew immediately I wanted it to be documentary-esque and handheld so that they felt free, right? We weren't like lighting all the time these very specific shots and you have to land here and this is your mark, right? I wanted them to feel free. So we worked a lot with improvising into scenes, improvising out of scenes. If things felt, awkward or not truthful, saying it in their own words. Also, sometimes I would just have us, Scott Miller, who's my director of photography, who's just incredible. He's like such a bodhisattva, like helping to create this space of trust for them so they feel really safe. And sometimes we would start rolling before like the scene, just to have them get into the process. So it was a lot of also me learning what each actor needed. Like a lot of times Jessica and I had been so like enmeshed and sharing the same brain, working on the script, me working with her on acting beats and like giving her exercises and talking about like breathing through the back of her heart, like we were so in sync that I also wanted to learn, of course, what the other actors needed. Skylar Verite, who plays Kevin, who's also just such an incredible talent. He brought so many ideas and he loved to like hash it out after we like, whereas just, she needs space. So it was really just me being sensitized to what each actor needed and learning that through working.
Awesome. Yeah, they have such a lovely chemistry, all these young actors. And how did you always know that you were going to cast your cousin? Did you always know she was going to play it? I know you developed the script together, but did you always know that she was going to play Sophie?
Yes, I mean, she wants to act and be an actor, and I think also there was something
I'm just going to jump in here for a second because on my end, Jessie's frozen. Erika, is that what you're seeing too? Okay, let's see about Jessie. If you maybe try turning off your video, we can at least get some of your audio. Oh, there you go. Okay, so
I'm back. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Just go ahead and talk about casting Jess as in that process.
I mean, it was really a no-brainer because I think part of what drew us to the experience was, working obviously together on giving voice to this shared experience. So it would have been a totally different thing if I had cast, some like star name or like that wasn't what it was about. It was really about giving as truthful and honest an experience as possible. And so that really was, and she was, wanting to go there, and we were willing to go there together and to work in that way. So yeah, and she has this quality that really draws you in a deep inner life. And I also felt that I hadn't really seen a lot of protagonists, young women in films, coming of age films, that had sort of the harshness that Sophie does and has this sort of like acerbic exterior that of course is because she's in deep pain. And I don't know, I think as a woman myself, there's always this pressure, I think, to put on this like gregarious exterior and be like smiling and really like performy. And the fact that, Sophie is not like that, she almost felt like an avatar too, to like how I had been sort of indoctrinated into womanhood. So I thought that was interesting too, that like Jessica has that, quality. And she brought that to Sophie that I think was really unique.
Yeah, it's interesting how Sophie really deals with her pain, especially she is very much acting out, in a sexual way to claim, I don't know, you tell me what she's claiming, but to me it looks like a sense of power, a sense of trying to fill a void. can you just talk about those moments and like, you know, I especially am interested in the scene where she loses her virginity. I found that super powerful and very realistic in a way that, you know, you just don't, like you said, you just don't see so much of the time when you see teen sex, it's in this performative, you know, sort of like idealized way. It's not this kind of real and awkward and also just kind of like just the physicalness of it. Just talk about that scene, talk about putting in there what you were trying to do with it.
Yeah.
And also maybe a little bit about like, you know, how you dealt with it with your young, you know, your young actors working with them.
Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, it was really important to me that the film obviously be very much from Sophie's point of view, that it be not objectifying or hypersexualizing in a way that I see so often in film and television, where like the girls have all the makeup on and their hair is perfect and like I wanted and strove for. I told all the girls, I was like, we're not having a makeup artist. I want to see your pimples. I want to see the capillaries. Like we want to see the sweat, and exactly what you pointed to, the awkwardness, the confusion, the reality of having an experience like this was really important to give voice to in an honest way. So that scene specifically, yeah, it's interesting because Jessica and I talked about this a lot. Like there's a version of that scene where she stops it before it even begins and she jumps up on the bed and, you know, announces like, get out, this is not what I want. But in life, it's so much more complicated, and you can have, she does stop it. She does realize that like, actually, you know, this isn't right. I don't want this, but it's not in like a perfect way because life isn't perfect. And even talking with the actor who played Tony, Chase Offerly, who's really so incredible, you know, when we were having discussions about Tony's character and Tony's point of view, he asks her, is this what she wants? Can he help her in another way? So he's trying to, you know, be communicative. But when you're that age, his experience really, you know, trumps hers, and he doesn't have the emotional intelligence or the ability to communicate or even sense once they're actually, you know, having sex, that actually she doesn't seem to be liking this or wanting this. You know, he sort of gets lost in his own experience, which I think is really common. You know, it's like we can be sort of islands sometimes, even though we can be at once very intimate and close together. So yeah, it was about again creating this environment that was very safe, where they felt that they could trust. You know, the sets were, it was so tiny. It was, you know, me and my director of photography, Scott Miller, in the room, no one else, you know, keeping it very private, making sure everyone felt very safe. And they were also just very brave, you know, to really go there and for us to really tell that story in a truthful way together. To speak larger, I think about how Sophie was approaching her grieving process. It was really like eroticism as the antidote to grief. And I think a big part of that has to do with when you experience a loss. You know, we have so many different ways that we can respond, but something I talked about a lot with Jessica was that feeling of like complete numbness or disappearing of self, feeling really groundless. And so this idea, and this is something that I just, you know, we didn't talk about it in this like more intellectual way, but something that I was hoping would come through is that grasping, that for feeling breath, feeling contact, warmth, is also a way to like re-embody herself, a way to like come back to the material world when she feels like the whole world has just been like, you know, turned on its axis. So it's sort of this grasping for yeah, feeling again, feeling embodied, feeling alive, feeling present, feeling connected to something real when everything feels so surreal in that moment.
Yeah, it's so interesting, this process of grieving. I think it was I really love the way you kind of start the movie with the ashes, and she deals with the ashes in a certain way at the very beginning, and then at the very end it's a completely different experience of what the ashes mean and what she needs them to mean, and how she is feeling at that time. And I think there's something interesting too at the very beginning of the film. It's the camera's so close on her and it's so with her, and then it starts to sort of gradually, I feel like, open up a little bit. We see a lot more of the surroundings, and especially contrasting that beach scene where there's a lot of very wides. Maybe, I'm not sure, but they feel like the widest of the movie, like the most expansive of the movie. Can you just talk a little bit about, you know, your style choices and working with your cinematographer, and like what you were trying to do from a kind of more technical level, like a filmmaking level, what you were doing?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Erika, for that question. I'm so glad that came through, because yeah, it was always an intention to have this feel very visceral, very immediate, and very, again, from Sophie's point of view. But then something that my director of photography and I, Scott, really found was that as she gets further along in her grieving process, exactly what you said, as she shares herself, as she starts to open up, so too does the world open up for the audience. We get to see more of her with her family. We get to see that actually how it's affecting her sister, Charlie, or my friend Dave Roberts, who plays Aaron. He was actually the only actor that was like not from Portland. He's a friend that I've worked with in an acting class, and was just so tremendous. And he flew in and just created this whole family dynamic. But yeah, that was something that was always, I think, in the back of my mind, but something that we truly really found as we were making it, Scott and I. And in terms of the look, I always knew that I wanted it to feel documentary-esque, but also have this sort of fable quality, or I'm obsessed with fairy tales. So although it's very subtle, the lenses we use, these Cook Pancro lenses, there's this sort of spherical quality, right? A roundedness. So you feel almost like you're in a bubble, or you're in a sort of globe. So it has the feeling of being very natural and grounded, and at the same time, a sort of otherworldly or magic quality to it. And that was something that also I worked with my colorist, Ian Berchevek, who is just incredible. We added a grain, and also just trying to play with honoring and being really like photographically honest with the color, and yet having a little bit of this sort of feeling of, again, like a fable-esque quality. And in terms of the ashes that you spoke about, originally, you know, the beginning of the script was a different introduction, but Naomi Sunrise Filamaro, who is my editor, she's just incredible. I just feel so lucky that I found these incredible collaborators, because she and I worked so hard together and just found such a really beautiful relationship over this film, and she cared so deeply. And when we were playing with the opening and that juxtaposition, that was sort of something magical that happened, that we then found the bookend of like her ingesting the ashes and trying to take them in, and then ending with her releasing them, which of course was always the end. But
where was this ingesting of the ashes? Where did that fall into the script initially?
I think it was more, oh my gosh, it was like, what was it? It was more like the middle-ish area.
That's part of her grieving process.
Yeah. But we ended up, you know, using a shot there was a scene that I had sort of crafted that was, I always wanted it to be like a oneer, and we ended up sort of cutting it up and then using it in 3 places in the film. So like that eating of the ashes at the beginning, the smelling of the clothes, and then the holding of the ashes on the bed, that originally had all been shot as one. And Naomi and I found that actually bringing that back throughout the film as sort of a repetition, intercut with, you know, her throughout the rest of her experiences, was a way to keep that narrative thread, and also to, yeah, sort of explore the shifting in her relationship to what those meant.
Totally. And speaking of like working with, you know, collaborators or finding people to help get this project off the ground, I mean, this is executive produced by Nicole Holofcener. And how did that come about? And you know, and what was she able to bring to you with all that experience and, you know, and advice and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, really, when I say this, like, this film is a true independent film. We had no money, no labs, no stars, everyone thought I was insane, you know, like first time act, like first time direct, what are you even talking? Like, it was so just a pure belief and sheer will to like get this made. And meeting Nicole was just, that was really, I think that the belief in telling this story made me so bold. And I had to tell it. I was on fire to tell it. And so I think that just, for whatever reason, really helped me to find the people that were drawn to help and drawn to be a part of this story. And for her specifically, I mean, I love her films. You know, obviously idolized her as a writer director. All of her movies too, just especially just being a woman, I never thought about directing. You know, when I grew up, I thought they were like magic. I thought it was like, you know, movies were like models and movie stars and like old men behind a curtain like Oz, you know. I didn't think that that was like possible. But finding her and learning about independent films and also seeing, you know, these characters that I felt like all the parts of myself that were like unlovable, I saw them celebrated in her films, and it just made me feel so seen. And so it's a kind of crazy story. My husband and I, who's also a filmmaker, we created a show together called Om City, and it went to the Tribeca Film Festival. So we were on like a list of, you know, Tribeca alumni. And Nicole was speaking at an event here in Los Angeles. And by that time, Naomi and I, my editor and I, we had a cut of the film. And I went to hear her speak, and it was when she was, Can You Ever Forgive Me was nominated, and she was speaking about her work, and it was a very intimate gathering. Connie Britton was moderating, and afterwards, I never do this, and I always feel like that's so weird, but like I just felt compelled, and I went up to her, and I said, you know, I have this cut of my first film. Would you mind, you know, giving me notes or giving me thoughts? And something, she was like laughing, and we of course talked a little bit before, but I got her email and I sent it to her thinking, you know, she will never watch it. She's too busy. But then a part of me in my soul also was like, I know she's going to watch this. I just felt it. And then she did, and she gave some really, really beautiful, helpful notes. And the big thing I think was that vote of confidence, that validation and belief. When you feel really alone for years making something, that it's hard to describe like what that means, you know, on like a human level. Absolutely. So it's a long-winded way of.
Oh, no, not too long-winded. Perfect. Yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, that's what we here at Women of Cinematic Arts are trying to do as well, is just to uplift everyone together, to say, you know, to be part of the community. I think we all need people to be, you know, be our champion and validate us. And I would say, as women and telling very, very personal female stories from the lens of, you know, a newer lens, a feminine lens, sometimes it's not always as easy for people to understand it right off. They keep trying to shift your narrative away. So you definitely need people like Nicole and, you know, other filmmakers to say like, you know, absolutely, you're super on track and you're right there. How long was it from when your cousin sent you the script to now? How long has that been?
It's been 3 years. I mean, it's been kind of, it's crazy. We started working on the script like pretty much immediately. And then we shot, it was like 6 months later. So I was like raising financing, we were casting, I was scouting, we were working on the script, was working with the actors like all at once. And part of it was the location we shot in was my cousin's childhood home, and that was being sold. So we had to shoot it while we had that location, because of course, independent film, you try to use all the spaces you have access to and use all your resources, right? And then also because a lot of the young actors were in college at the time, they were going to be gone, you know, in the fall to go to school. So I felt like, okay, and I, you know, reached out and was asking people, and just like all sort of this hurricane of, okay, if we have the majority of the actors, if we have our director of photography in this location, we should just do it now, because it could never happen. So with that, I raised just enough money for us to shoot. And then it was raising additional financing for post. working with my editor. And so I had to do like 4 additional raises, and we did. Post took a year because, had to find the resources, and then getting other people on board and finding those other collaborators. So it's been about 3 years. We were gonna premiere, I guess it was a year ago in March, at the Portland International Film Festival, on the 11th. It was right before, the pandemic. So it's been a journey. And then we world premiered at Deauville, which was just such an honor, and I wish we could have gone, but such is life.
It would have been a very nice vacation, right? For sure. Beautiful. Definitely. Can you talk a little bit about the music? I think there was some, not only is the music great, there's a lot of great songs in there, and it looks like original music as well. But also I thought it was very interesting that many times the music cuts off very abruptly at the scene change, and especially in the beginning where I feel like it was a conscious choice to have a bit these kind of harsh transitions. A lot of times music is kind of alluded to being part of the emotional journey, right? It's helping us push the emotional journey, and then her emotional journey would just like cut to a new scene and cut off. Was that what you were intending to do with those choices? And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about, the different composers and artists that you worked with.
Yeah. Yes, that abruptness and feeling again like things are cut short or like the rug's being pulled out was very intentional. And for it to feel fragmented and disjointed, because a part of sort of, again, listening to like what the film wanted to be was how do you find like the shape of grief? Like how cinematically, what does that look like? What does that feel like, that fragmentation? And what I found was, coming from theater and also because of working with these actors, allowing them to settle into the scene, I really was inspired to do a lot of one-ers, which of course are really complicated and very difficult with very little money and very little time. But when you can work that way, then it really feels like the actors are able to relax, they're able to really breathe, and it doesn't feel, again, so performance oriented, and it allows for them to really, I think, like shine in the scene. So it became a thing about balancing these one-ers with, the jump cuts and the sort of fragmentation, and using both of those things together, I think creates a feeling of this fragmentation and this disjointed quality in the narrative that definitely is intentional. And even in the, the scenes that are like, it's all sort of vignette-y, right? And I remember talking to, my editor Naomi about this, that a lot of times too, it's like that feeling of, and with Scott, my director of photography, the feeling of like, going close on like her pulling the grass, or just feeling like you're in a moment that's suspended in time and almost like zoomed in, this like kaleidoscope effect is something that we also wanted to play with the sound. So in terms of, the music, I knew, of course, had to find amazing needle drops because I'm obsessed with music. And I wanted the music similar to everything. I wanted to feel like, a bunch of girls in the basement next door that were like banging and making these sounds. Like same with the parties, right? Like the lighting had to feel like something that these kids could actually like have in their basements and create, rather than something like super outlandish. So my producer, Lindsay Guerrero, who is just a queen, being on this journey from the very beginning, she put me in touch with the Crystal Creative, which is this boutique licensing agency in Portland. Tommy and Chad are just incredible. And I really pushed, I had a really specific sound, and they kind of made magic happen. I sent them a lot of samples. I, found stuff on Bandcamp, researched a lot of Portland-based bands. They had relationships with artists there, Marrow, and also some bands in Oakland. So it was really, again, a collaboration. And then also Beverly, there are 2 tracks by this band Beverly, my friend Drew Citron from college, who I've put her songs in everything I've ever made. She's just, I don't know, she's like part of the soundtrack that took my life. And there's something about that like angsty guitar and her vocals that felt so Sophie and so like the film. And we were very lucky that we're able to get those. Nate Heller is my composer, and he's just incredible. I just feel so lucky to have gotten to meet him and collaborate with him. And I knew that although we needed the needle drops, and I also wanted a lot of silence, I wanted to link Sophie's mother and that memory in the natural world in also its own way. So I talked to him a lot about using the composition as a way to sort of give voice to her inner world and to connect that narratively to the natural world and to this sort of maternal space. So he and I worked together, and he sent me this incredible, like, sample of a song. And then that last song he created with his niece, King Isis, who's just extraordinary. When he played that last tune for me, I remember I was sitting with him and like just started weeping. Her voice just, it has such a rawness and yet also this like effervescent quality. There's like an innocence to it. And also you can tell she's been through it, which I feel like for me is Sophie, and is also, it's a lot of young women that I feel like are oftentimes underestimated or doubted. And I really wanted to give voice to that like maturity. And they just, created this gorgeous song. It was originally an entire like epic pop song. And I felt like such a freak because I was like, this is incredible. But then I wanted it to devolve. Like, I didn't want it to end perfectly tied in a bow. I needed it to sort of fall apart and become a soundscape and then become just the sounds of the natural world, like how we started. So he was very gracious in creating this like perfect thing and letting me mess it up,
Absolutely. I just want to invite anybody, if they have any questions, to go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Jessie, can you talk a little bit about like Portland as a character? Because it feels like it's important that it's set there, not just because of you had access to the house or whatever, but it feels like Portland matters to Sophie. You film quite a lot of different places, kind of several outdoor kind of spaces of beauty and grandeur, and then obviously the smaller spaces in the houses and things like that. So just talk about why Portland. Why did Portland speak to you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, initially that was where, yes, locations and all of that, but originally that it was not really in the script at all. That was something that when I scouted, I just fell in love with the place, and I was just so. It's interesting. I think because Jessica and a lot of those actors had grown up there. It's sort of that thing where you're like, oh yeah, this is home, like whatever, big deal. And when I got there and Lindsay took me like scouting and we all went around and, Jessica, Lindsay and I were like in the car and like, look, I just was blown away by, the lichen on the trees, the amount of like water in the air. It just felt so incredible and alive. And again, like tactile. And so that really to me served also narratively. And I was like, that sense of, again, embodying the world was something I really wanted to capture. And I mean, I've when we were scouting, I was just finding Bridge of the Gods, La Tourelle Falls. Originally, those were not in the script at all. But again, I just felt narratively like linking these natural spaces to the memory of Sophie's mother. And this idea that to me, I was like, whenever I feel closest to my dad, often it's like in nature. It's like being out in the elements. And in my mind, I just imagined that these were places that Sophie would go with her mom, with the family, together. And so when they travel to these spaces, her presence is there. And that short sand beach at the end, actually, it was my uncle who I remember I was like, it needs to be an odyssey. Like, they're in the car, they go through, there has to be this journey, this experience. And he recommended that beach. And so my director of photography and I, on our one day off, went and scouted it. And I watched how the landscape changed, from the highways to these like wheat fields, to these like tall, skinny pine trees, to the ocean. And it felt so evocative and so Yeah, perfect, emblematic of the experience. And also because I didn't I didn't want to have a ton of cell phones in the movie. Like, of course, in my mind, like this takes place pre-Trump, because also I was like, all these characters would totally be marching, and like this would be a totally different movie. Like this had to be sort of before that moment. And of course, they're all into social media, but not the same as a lot of young people that grew up in like these really super urban cities, because you can go to the river and you can go to the ocean and you can go on these epic hikes. So that also felt like a really important quality to infuse in the film.
Very nice. It's yeah, it really was. It was a very interesting. It was. I've been to Portland. It was lovely to see it again through your eyes. Can you talk about? Can you talk a little bit about? You're on this indie film. You know, how many days did you shoot? What did you have to kind of? I don't know, give up, make compromises because things happened, and you just kind of went through it. Like, just talk about the indie filmmaking experience on this particular film. How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was 15 days. Originally, we were only going to do 13 days and then two like MOS. And I was like, that no, we need the sound. Like I was so obsessed with like capturing the actual birds and like the sounds of the water and like all of that texture, orally was like so vital. So I mean, it was a pretty insane production. It was like we were so small. Joe Dinnan, my other producer, who is just incredible. He and I have worked on just about everything we've done together. He was the one that introduced me to Lindsay, who had just moved to Portland. So he actually was in New York, like helping with contracts and like, we were like putting schedules together. And then Lindsay and I were on the ground. And it was really, like the three of us. And um, it was like all hands on deck, and even working on like the one liner and working on the schedule, like I really tried to, again, because I come from an actor's perspective and background, and I just love actors, and I really wanted all of these actors to feel like, set up for success as much as possible, trying to shoot in order, which of course is impossible, but trying to pick moments of like, Sophie's experiences to help Jessica, really have that in real time, like having the scene with her and Kevin Schuyler's character early at the coffee shop, having that be really early, so that sort of the jitters of the first few days of filming when things are awkward would work with the performance and with that moment, and then saving the last scene, the release of the ashes, till like the end of shooting, so we really are having this emotional cathartic moment after being this like wild circus family together. It was sort of working and trying to work strategically with everything that we had available. But yeah, indie film, it's like Lindsay and I were loading gear into her like basement at like all hours of the day. Her husband, bless his heart, let us use his truck. Like we shot the party scenes in like, family friends' basements, and cast were sleeping in people's houses. Like I slept in my uncle's best friend's basement. Like it was all very, very independent film, very wild.
It definitely sounds like it. We're about to wrap up, but I'm just curious, how was working through for you this grief process, and do you feel like you've come to a different place at the end of this, working through some of, was it as cathartic as it seems like it was? And are you going to, maybe is more of your work going to be in this theme, or are you going to you have other interests coming up?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think because I was so focused on the film and the story and holding this space for all these people, that it really wasn't about, my grieving like there wasn't space or time. That's not, so it's kind of interesting how now as we're sharing the film and I'm reflecting on it, it's taking on a new sort of quality. And I think the thing I'm learning is that the grieving process is never done with you, and it is a dance. But I think the power of art to, you know, that transmission of our vulnerabilities and of our intimacy, and really like not being afraid to share the truth of who you are, is something that I will absolutely continue to explore in my work. And yeah, I have a pilot that I'm writing that is set in Portland, that is like coming of age, that has like a fantasy sci-fi bent that I'm working on. And then my friend and I actually, we just finished the Sundance Lab developing a pilot that was inspired by a short film we made together. So we'll be taking that out soon. So yeah, I think I'm always going to be interested in themes of becoming, and you know, that transition of girlhood to womanhood, of course. But I'm really excited to release the film, like you know, psychically, emotionally. Like, it's been such a journey, and for other people to, you know, imprint their imaginations and their experiences, because I think ultimately that's the most important thing to come out of this film, was all the people that opened up their hearts, you know, and shared their vulnerability and their experiences. All the people that, whether they've lost a parent or not, you know, we all experience loss. We all experience, especially now, right? Like we're all dealing with this on such a intense global scale, and even like our country was founded on a lot of unresolved grief, right? So I think although we can't take away someone else's pain, it's like just to be able to accompany, to accompany and be accompanied is what I hope this film can do.
Well, Jessie, it's just been a pleasure to talk to you. You have a lovely film. I think it has definite resonance for our time, and we wish it complete well, and we hope all the audiences find it and find you, and all the good things come to you. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you so much, really, Erika. This is so a pleasure. This is the first one, so before we release tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just wanted to say thanks as well, and I hope everyone goes out and recommends the film and people find it. And please, Jessie, come back with your next film.
Thank you. I can't wait. Yes, more soon. Thanks everyone so much.
Take care.
Bye.